Welcome everybody, hand of the day review from my Discord. This is going to make you a better poker player. So today we're looking at this very interesting spot that was sent in by a viewer. If you want to participate in these analyses, definitely join the Discord, definitely join the hand of the day channel. So here cutoff starts by, middle position starts by opening, and I think middle position is tagged as a fish. Then button goes for a very, very small 3-bet. Now, Button was said to be a 25 NL reg, but I guess he's a bit of a fishy reg, and this is just information that was sent in by the viewer. And so Hero decides to go for a cold 4-bet. So this 4-bet I think is maybe a little bit small. We could get away with sizing up a little bit, because at this point, I think this range is going to have a lot of stuff that's going to fold regardless of the size, and a lot of stuff that's going to continue regardless of the size as well. So personally, I prefer to go with a larger 3-bet because I don't think people are going to be very sensitive to smaller 3-bets and necessarily call as much as they should when they're making this sort of play pre-flop. This is a very strange size, so it definitely puts a lot of questionable stuff in this person's range, as well as some very strong stuff. So Button goes for a call, and then on the flop we go for a small bet. Button goes for a raise, and then Hero decides to call. So this call would be pretty much 0 EV at the at Nash. We are going for a cold 4-bet here, and then our opponent is making a raise on the flop, so we are going to be behind all of their value, and we are going to be ahead of their bluffs. It's important to note that their bluffs here could come from some flush draws, could come from some maybe weaker pocket pairs, right? I could definitely see like pocket 6s or pocket 5s sneakily taking this line. And then on the turn, Villain goes check, and then on the river, we go for a small bet, Button raises all in, and then we go fold. So this small river bet, I think, is a little bit strange, because our hand does have showdown value versus like their weaker hands. If we wanted to construct a betting range here, I think the small bet might make sense with Ace King, and then you center the betting range around that. If we want to bet Ace King small, I think we're basically hoping that our opponent isn't going to re-raise often enough. In which case, betting Ace King small is quite nice, because otherwise I think it might just be better to check. Given that the average reg is probably going to not bluff often enough after we check. So if we're holding Ace-King here, my main thoughts are, how can I get to showdown as easily as possible? The small bet works if we get called by worse, so like Ace-Queen, and if our opponent doesn't raise often enough. And then you can obviously, put your pocket aces or whatever into that line as well. And I think that the check line works a little bit better if we expect our opponent to give up on the river and not really reopen the action. So it's tough to say which one is better. If you go for a small bet and you want to start bluffing with pocket kings, again, like you're not going to have a lot of zero equity like bluffs on this particular river, just because your calling range on the flop is going to be pretty tight. So it's probably okay to do that, but then again, we have to we're basically counting on our opponent to either fold better or to fold the right amount, and possibly, if we were to check, to bluff a lot, right? So if we can bet really small and then our opponent has folds, we can avoid getting into the river check line where our opponent is going to be pretty aggressive. So there's a lot of different assumptions that we have to make, and all of these different assumptions are going to lead us to play certain hands differently. In general, I do go with the assumption that our opponents are not going to reopen the action often enough, so I don't think it's necessarily the best idea to bet small on the river, because I also don't expect our opponent to fold anything that's better than pocket kings. So I think checking and then just getting to showdown cheaply, winning versus like pocket 6s or whatever, is definitely going to be more than fine. I don't think people are really bluffing often enough. So we bet small here, and then our opponent goes for jam. So the jam is definitely, it's most likely going to be pretty strong. It's unless our opponent is one of the type of people who is raising a lot versus smaller sizes because they suspect the size is weak, then I think that this one is going to be overly strong. I think this particular player type, who might be a little bit short stacked and going for the very, very small 3-bet preflop, might actually fall into the category of people who re-raise pretty aggressively versus small bets. It's quite tough to say, right? We don't really have any additional info on villain, but either way, we definitely don't have the equity to call. So if our opponent bluffs here, they still are going to be repping a lot of strong hands. And I think simply put, we just don't have the correct equity to call. JD, a member from the Discord, actually made a good spreadsheet which sort of computes like how frequently our opponents might be taking this particular line with different hands that they might have pre-flop. And all of this is adjusted and played around with the values to sort of have a rough estimate of how much equity we have on the river. There's even a SPU factor and a turn SPU factor here, which helps us make a somewhat reasonable assumption. And then on the river, it states that we really don't have a lot of equity, right? So like I said, pocket kings here would essentially be a bluff. We do have a tiny bit of showdown value. So for us to check, it would basically be saying that we expect our opponent to not really reopen the action with a lot of hands that we beat. So with that said, right, like I don't think we can call versus the raise at all. And then if we check or bet small, really depends on a couple of different incentives, but I would lean towards checking on the river as played. Hope you guys enjoyed the analysis, and I'll see you in the next one.